Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. If you are new here, I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome back to another true crime and makeup episode. Today we are covering the case of Gerard John Schaefer. He looks like Danny DeVito playing the Penguin in Batman. I had to say it, I had to get it off my chest. He is an absolute evil, disgusting, horrific, monstrous monster, if ever I've heard one. This man's victim count is so high that the actual number of victims that he has is unknown. He was going detected for so long, and honestly it would be a mother of one of his victims that would actually put the pieces together and point police in the right direction. Before we do get into the case though, I just want to ask and beg and plead with you, please, if you enjoy this video, make sure you do subscribe with the notification bell on. Please leave a like, but most importantly, please leave a comment. My cinnamon brown video did so well because you guys really came through with the engagement. It really pushed it out to YouTube, which is so greatly appreciated. So if you can just leave a comment, it can be an emoji, it can be a question, it can be some slander about this evil guy that we're going to talk about, or whatever you want to talk about, just, you know, whatever. But if you could leave a comment, it would mean the absolute world to me. If you're new here, hi, my name's Anna. I am a certified yapper, and I decided one day to come on the internet and yap about true crime, which is the thing I'm most passionate about, and I wanted to find a community of people who are also as passionate as I am, and I think I found you. If you do enjoy true crime, I highly suggest that you subscribe to my channel because I post twice a week, every single week, a new interesting true crime case. Don't forget you can leave your suggestions down below in the comments, or you can send them over to my email, which is linked down below. Without any further rambling or any further ado, let's get into the case of Gerard John Schaefer. Just a very quick FYI, I can hear seagulls outside, which is really strange because like surely they should now be south for the winter, but then again it is only autumn. But I don't live near a seaside. I'm in the middle of nowhere. Like I don't know where these seagulls are coming from. So if you hear that, please just ignore it. Also, it is Halloween season. It is Halloween. I love Halloween, and you know, like my spirit animal is that little girl who's like, look at it's freaking bats. I love Halloween. Look how cute. And a skeleton, I'm gonna call him Steve, but I just thought it was cute. I feel like I could have done more. I'd love to go more a horror route, but look at it. It's giving autumn, it's giving fall. Also, just before I jump into this case, I have started watching Monsters on Netflix, the Menendez brothers one, and I really want, what do you think? What are you thinking of it? I think the cast is amazing. I think the brothers, the actors who play the brothers, are phenomenal. Like really good. I'm up to episode 4, but by the time you see this video, I've most likely finished it. But so far, I'm blown away. I know that case very well, and so much controversy, I don't even know what I can say, but I want to know what you think. So today we're talking about Gerard John Schaefer. Now, this guy's face. What is wrong with these people's faces? See, for me, this guy in this particular photo that I'll put on the screen, he's given Danny DeVito playing the Penguin in Batman. Have you seen it? The Batman with Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman, great film. But he's given Danny DeVito, and I don't know why. But anyway, Gerard John Schaefer, he was born on March the 26th of 1946 in Neenah, Wisconsin. And he was the first of 3 children to Gerard John Schaefer Sr. and Doris Marie Schaefer. So Gerard Sr., he worked as a travelling salesman. He was frequently out of the house. And then Doris, she worked as like a housewife. That was her full-time job. But she really seemed to care about her children a lot more than Gerard Sr. So Schaefer, he would be raised in Nashville, Tennessee, and then him and his family would move to Atlanta, Georgia, and he would attend Marist Academy. And then in 1960, his family relocated to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and this is where he would be for most of the time, unfortunately. Gerard Sr., he really struggled with alcohol abuse. He would drink constantly. Like, the times where he wasn't travelling around for work, anytime he was home, He was drunk as a skunk and just like abusing his family. Like, he would turn very verbally abusive more so. There is reports of physical abuse, but it did seem like the verbal abuse was the worst part of it. And he'd start on his wife Doris before then focusing his attention onto his children. Now, his alcohol abuse, coupled with the constant relocating that they did for his work, meant that they had a really, really turbulent childhood. Not just Gerard Schaefer Jr., but all of his siblings, all three of them, they all went through the same stuff. And like, credit where it's due to Doris, she did try her best to make the house as happy and safe as she possibly could, but ultimately, living with someone like Gerard Sr. was just never going to be happy. But she did try to protect her children, but it wouldn't really work. So as you can imagine, the only real time that the family would get some peace and quiet and be able to live a somewhat normal, happy life was when Gerard Sr. was travelling for work. And luckily for the family, this happened quite often. So, you know, there could be quite a bit of peacefulness for maybe like a day or two at a time, but then ultimately Gerard Sr. comes home, throws his toys at the pram and causes a ruckus. Now, I will say, Gerard Jr. in particular, he had a very strange relationship with his father, because when his father started his crap, he was like, I'm not taking that. I'm sick and tired of your constant belittling, how you make me feel. You make me feel unloved. I'm constantly being criticised by you. I'm not taking it. And he would argue back against his dad. And one thing that really affected Gerard Jr. and also his younger brother was the fact that they felt as though their dad preferred their younger sister to the both of them. The both of them never really seen love in the way that their sister did from their father, and they just felt incredibly unloved by their dad. But luckily for them, they were quite close with their mother Doris, and she would take them under her wing and make them feel loved and give them compassion. But again, whenever Gerard Sr. was home, this was very difficult for Doris to do, because then Gerard Sr. would start on her. Also, just before I get back into Gerard, I think I want to do like a makeup look inspired by pumpkin spice. I know a lot of you don't care for the makeup, you're only here for the true crime, which I am too, but I just like to have my hands busy and distract myself. But yeah, pumpkin spice themed makeup, so I'm thinking like coppers and browns and warm tones. So as a child, Gerard Jr., he had really enjoyed being outdoors. He was very much an outdoorsy kind of person, and I would speculate that that's because indoors his father was a piece of crap and treated him like dirt. But who knows? Now, by his adolescence, he had a really strong interest in all things nature. He loved being out in nature, loved going through the woods. Going to be a problem. And he would just go out into nature and observe his surroundings, which sounds really wholesome. And it would start off that way, but it will not continue that way. So a lot of his childhood was spent going through the woods, identifying species of like bugs and animals that he's seen. So Gerard's just out there being Gerard of the jungle, right? Living his best life. As a teenager, Gerard Jr., he started to collect guns. Here we go, people, here we go. He also really enjoyed hunting. Here we go. He also really enjoyed fishing. Poor fish, but not as much of a red flag as hunting and collecting guns, but nonetheless very sad for the fish. If I was a fish, I wouldn't want to see his ugly mug as like my last image, but hey ho. Now, hunting, that seemed to be the one thing that when Gerard Sr. was home and, you know, not abusing his family, that he would actually bond with Gerard Jr. over. They really enjoyed the activity of hunting, and that was like their prime time together. Shooting up, killing innocent animals, all that stuff. Now, Schaefer, he wasn't so much as like a stereotypical loner psycho guy. Like, peers at his school did recall him not really belonging to any sort of group. Like, he never really had a clique that he fit in with. He kept himself to himself, but he wasn't really a weirdo. People just thought that this was a guy that really liked to spend his free time outdoors and just be by himself. He's not a complete loner, but he's also not Mr. Popular. He had told people that the reason that he likes to be outdoors by himself so much is because he has aspirations of becoming a forest ranger. Now at this point, this is when Creepy McCreeperson really starts to come into his own. By his teenage years, Gerard Jerry the Sicko, he has started having these really intense erotic fantasies. Now, it's not your typical like teenage lust, it's not your typical like going through puberty and being a bit horny. It's more brutal than that. He was having really intense fantasies about brutalising women, hurting women for his own pleasure, but the women that he would hurt would only be women that he deemed worthy of receiving his pain. Okay. And then gradually, at a very intense speed, Gerard, he starts to grow a very strong liking for sadomasochism, which is, of course, when you derive pleasure from physical or psychological pain being inflicted upon you and others. He was also really into bondage at this point, specifically the restraining and tying up part of bondage, which is okay if you consent to that stuff, but his fantasies were women who were not consenting to that stuff. And Gerard the Sicko, he would inflict pain upon himself whilst he was playing with little Gerard. And he would usually wear women's underwear whilst he was masturbating, and then he would achieve orgasm by autoerotic asphyxiation, which is where the person restricts airflow to themselves to reach like this high whilst they orgasm, and these people can actually be referred to as gaspers. Now, one of Jerry the Sicko's favourite things to do is he would take himself into the woods that he enjoyed so much and spent so much time in, and he would tie himself to a tree. Now, I know what you're thinking, oh how nice, he wants to save the trees, love a political man. No. He was tying himself to the trees so he could get his groove on in the woods, if you know what I'm saying. Like, he was tying himself up to the trees to simulate him being restrained, and then he would pleasure himself and it felt like someone else was doing it to him. Now, it gets to a point in Gerard's life where his fantasies are starting to take over his everyday life. Like, he was spending most of his day playing with himself or taking himself into the woods for hours on end and like repeating this simulation of his own restraint whilst being played with. So as a teenager, Jerry, he ends up becoming a peeping Tom. He always seemed to become a peeping Tom, and he was watching young girls get dressed through their windows, and he used to get frustrated because he would say that the girls were doing it deliberately because they knew he was watching. I'm sorry, no one's stripping for you. Like, Mr. Penguin Man, no one is stripping for you. Like, he even somehow, I don't know, had a girlfriend as a teenager, and he said to her, like, he would, like, she would be standing with him and he'd be looking in young girls' windows, and he would say to her, oh, they're doing that for me. Like, they know that I'm watching and that's why they're doing it. And he'd act like it really annoyed him. Well, then turn away. Now, female classmates of Gerard's thought that he was quite a weirdo, and they would say the only thing that they really remember of Jerry is that they would have to sit and tuck their skirts under their legs because Jerry would practically stand on his head just to see your pants. Creep. Quick coffee break. Now, surprisingly, teachers believed that Jerry, he had the potential to do really well. He was a really promising student and he would go on to graduate from school, and he graduated in June of 1964, and then after he left school he briefly became a fishing guide for the Everglades, which is that not that place that has like all the crocodiles or alligators or both? Because if it is, like, low-key wish he had fell in. So Schaefer, he went on to attend Broward Community College, and he was initially studying social studies, but then he made the decision to switch over to teaching, which he thought he would thrive in, but we'll get to that because he won't. Now, when he switched over to teaching, his grades just became very average. He wasn't doing terrible, but he wasn't doing great either. He was very much just in the middle. Once he finished his sophomore year, he was then accepted on a scholarship to the Florida Atlantic University. Schaefer, he begins his studies in 1968, and the goal for him was to achieve a Bachelor of Arts in Education. And to my surprise, yet again, Schaefer actually found himself a wife at one point. So he married Martha Louise Fogg, and their marriage would last from December of 1968 up until 1970, where Martha had to get a divorce from him because she had said that his sexual demands were becoming far too much for her and they were very brutal, and she almost felt like she was being raped by him. And not only that, but most of his time was spent hunting, and then when he came home he was just demanding sex right away. Like, not even a "hey honey, how's your day?" It's like, "hey honey, get in the bedroom." It was a horrible living situation for Martha, and when she filed the divorce she had cited the reason for this being extreme cruelty from Schaefer to her. So in March of 1969, Schaefer, he is able to land himself a teaching internship at Plantation High School. Now, the position was due to start on September the 23rd, so he starts there, and by November the 7th of that same year, he would be fired. Now, the reason he was fired is because he could not accept orders from his superiors. He didn't follow the rules, and most of his class, if we can even call it a class, was spent trying to enforce his own moral and political views onto students. And in that short amount of time, a mass amount of complaints had been raised against Schaefer as a teacher. So they were like, "You gotta go." So just 4 months later, in March of 1970, Schaefer had yet another application accepted for an internship at another high school, and this high school was Stranahan High School. Now, yet again, the same stuff happens. He does not follow orders, he's inappropriate with the pupils, doesn't listen to his superiors, and he winds up getting his ass fired again. Like, teachers had even said that his knowledge, or lack thereof, he had no knowledge on what he was teaching. So he would just blab in the class. Like, he was a certified yapper, but no in a good way. No like us. And apparently he was really arrogant. So come May that very same year, he would be fired, and that there would end his dreams of being a teacher. Thank God. This whole next bit is just a complete and utter shambles. Beyond belief, like, it's crazy. So September the 1st, 1970, Schaefer, he applies for a position within the Wilton Manor Police Department. Now, of course, Schaefer, being the skilled liar that he is, he never disclosed his previous 2 firings. He also claimed that he had 2 years experience as a research assistant at FAU, and astonishingly, police did not verify his work history at all, and he would be inducted into the Broward County Police Department in September 1971, and then he graduated as a patrolman at the age of 25. I'm glad to see that the police are very thorough of who they hire to protect the citizens. In January of 1971, before his police career had properly taken off, Schaefer met 19-year-old Teresa Dean, and the pair had dated for quite a long time. And after a while, Schaefer did propose. Like, a couple of months into the relationship, Schaefer proposes and they get married in Fort Lauderdale in September. And honestly, when Schaefer married Teresa Dean, he felt like all his prayers and all his wishes had been answered, because she would comply with his sexual demands, and she would do anything she possibly could to please this man, no matter how deviant it was, no matter how minging it was. She would comply. Would it shock any of us to realise that Schaefer's police performance was poor at best? Okay, poor at the very best. That's the best way we can actually describe how he acted as a police officer. So he lasted 6 months in his position, and then he had been dismissed. And the reason for this dismissal is because he couldn't keep his creep inside. He had to let it loose. He had a problem and a habit of stopping young female drivers for really, really minor traffic offences, or sometimes claiming that they had committed a traffic offence when they hadn't. Now, the reason that he was stopping them was so he could take down their licence plate number. He would then go back to the department, pop it into a database, get their contact details, and then contact them for a date to go out with them. Does this man have a magic mirror? Because why is he thinking that his penguin looking face is going to land anyone for a date? He's a creepy police officer. Stop it. And I really will never understand why, but these types of people, things seem to work in their favour for such a long time. So Schaefer had actually been looking for a better paying police position, as if he bloody deserved it when his performance was poor at best. Anyway, so he had applied for a different police position in a different department. So when he was dismissed from this one, he had another one to start. So he was actually starting as a deputy in the Martin County Sheriff Department, and he would be starting there in June of 1972. And you're probably thinking, well, how did he get this though? Like, how did he get this if he's been dismissed and let go from Wilton Manor's department? He forged his own letter of recommendation stating that he was a superb police officer who was absolutely great and they're sad to see go, but deserves bigger and better opportunities. He is so far up his own ass. It's unbelievable. And annoyingly, the Martin County Sheriff's Department, all they did was carry out a very basic criminal background check, which revealed at this point that he had no criminal record, and they were like, you got the job. So at this point, Gerard Schaefer, he's working in his position as a deputy, you know, keeping the streets safe. Is he really though? Nah. And whilst he was working as a police officer was when he would commit some of the most heinous, disgusting, horrific crimes that you will ever hear of. So on the afternoon of July the 21st, 1972, Nancy Ellen Trotter, who was 18, and Paula Sue Wells, who was 17, they were hitchhiking this afternoon. Now, these young girls, they would be picked up by a police officer, which, you know, you would think is probably the safest thing that can happen to you whilst you're hitchhiking. You know, you'd feel safe with a police officer. But that police officer would be Gerard John Schaefer. Creepy Ger. Ger the sicko. So he picked these young girls up and he drove them to their destination of Stuart, and whilst they were in the car with Schaefer, he was basically warning them against hitchhiking. He told them the dangers of hitchhiking. He would tell them that you can't trust strangers, that there's bad people in the world. Yeah, you. He said that not everyone has the best intentions, unlike him. Now, Nancy and Paula, they confirm that they're not actually local to the area and they were planning on going to Jensen Beach the very next day. Now, Schaefer, he starts acting like this concerned police officer who just wants the best for his citizens, okay? And he says to them, you know, if you're going to Jensen Beach, I would feel more comfortable if I drove you, because then I'd know that you'd get there safe and you'd get home safe as well, which to the girls was a really nice thing, because yes, they are going to feel safe with a police officer. And Schaefer, he's given it the whole, you know, if you were my daughters, I wouldn't be very comfortable with you hitchhiking with complete strangers, even though he's a complete stranger. But he played that card and just said he wanted to ensure that they got there safely, because otherwise he wouldn't be able to sleep. And the girls, they were like, my God, this guy's so kind, and they accept this lift from him. So it's 9:15 a.m. the very next morning, and Schaefer met both the girls at a bandstand as they had arranged the previous day. Now, Schaefer, when he rocks up, he is in his own vehicle and he does not have his police uniform on. And the girls are a bit like, this seems a bit strange. Like, you know, we wanted a lift off a police officer to feel safe, but you've turned up off duty and now we don't feel so safe. But Schaefer said that he was in fact on duty, but he was undercover, so he can't wear his police uniform or drive a marked car, which is why he was driving his own unmarked car. The girls at this point, they're not going to question that because he's not really given them any red flags. He's seemed like this concerned guy who wants to help them, and so they decide to go with him and take the lift. Now, as soon as they get on the road, Schaefer immediately deviates from the route that they're taking, the route to Jensen Beach, and he says, oh, like, you know, this is on the way, but I really want to show you this old Spanish fort in the woods. Super cool, you're gonna love it. The girls are a bit like, we just want to go to the beach, like, you know, we want to catch tan, we don't want to see your wee old Spanish fort. But he drives them there anyway. Now, on the way here, he begins again talking about how these girls could be in danger, how these girls could be sold into white slavery, how they really shouldn't ever trust anyone, not a stranger at least. And he's kind of taunting them and being like, you know, it's lucky you see me, you could end up in danger, or maybe you are in danger, ha 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 ha. And it's at this point that the girls start to think, oh my god, we've picked the wrong guy. So Schaefer, he pulls up to this old shed in the forest, and immediately once he's there, he ties up the girls and gags them. Now, one of the girls is taken away into the forest and is tied to this really large cypress tree. So he binds her legs around the tree. Well, not around the tree, what am I saying? He ties her legs to the tree, just below her knees. Schaefer then proceeds to put a noose around her neck and has her standing on like an exposed root of the tree, and this root can just fit her feet and no more. Now, the thing is, she is up off the ground, standing on this root. If she moves even slightly, the girl would end up hanging herself. So she cannot move. Her hands are behind her back, she's completely restricted and in complete terror. So Schaefer goes back and gets the other girl, and he takes her to a tree that is like a very short distance away from the other girl. So they're very close next to each other, and he ties her up to the tree the same way, noose around the neck, standing on an exposed root, and with her hands tied behind her back. If she moved, she would have hung herself. Whilst these girls are standing on this exposed root, Schaefer then starts to fondle and molest each one of them. Bearing in mind, and I know I keep saying it, but bearing in mind, if they tried to move to get away from him, they would hang. They would end up dying. So these girls are having to stand as still as they can whilst this big, ugly, penguin-looking freak is fondling and molesting and sexually abusing them both. Schaefer receives an urgent radio message saying that all the police have to head back to the department. There's like an emergency of some sort. So he leaves the girls hanging with the noose around their neck, standing on this exposed root, hands behind their back, and he says, I gotta go. And before he left, he warned them to not try and run away because he wouldn't be very far down the road and he would come back and get them. Schaefer did warn the girls, when I come back, I'm going to finish you off. So these girls are like, oh my god, like, if we run, we could die, but if we don't try and run, then we're going to die anyway. So they were going to do everything they could to escape whilst this man was away. So Schaefer, he has been back at the police station, he's did whatever he has to do, and he heads back to the woods 2 hours later. When he gets to the woods, he discovers that Nancy and Paula have escaped. They were able to escape. The girls, they had been able to wriggle their way out of the rope that was tying them to the tree around their legs. So they're able to get out of that, and then they're also able to prop themselves up just enough that they can take their head out of the noose, and they made a run for it. So the minute that Schaefer sees that these girls have been able to free themselves, he drives home immediately, and then he calls the sheriff of his department. So he calls up his sheriff and he says, I've done something foolish. You'll be so mad at me. So Schaefer claims to his sheriff that he had tried to teach young girls the risks of hitchhiking with strangers and said that he had overdone the job. So immediately the sheriff's like, oh, for sake, like, what were you thinking, you idiotic, stupid, silly, penguin-looking man? Why would you do that? And 2 officers, they head out and they're driving along the Florida State A1A. And close by, they would see one partially gagged teenage girl with her hands bound behind her back, swimming on her back, like doing flutter kicks on her back across a subtropical river. And when this teenage girl would climb up from the riverbank, police noticed right away that her blouse was completely shredded, as well as the jeans that she was wearing. And once she had run up and got the gag removed, she immediately just blurted Nancy, you know, to identify herself to the police. And she had said that she was really worried about her friend who had been with her, who she had lost whilst they were running through the woods. Nancy would be so relieved when the police told her that they had actually found Paula 45 minutes earlier on the highway. And luckily, Paula was now at the police station giving her statement, and Nancy would go to join her. So Nancy gets back to the station, she's reunited with Paula to both of their relief, and they start telling the police what had happened to them in the abduction, how they had been able to free themselves, and then they were able to give a very detailed description of their abductor as well as their vehicle, and then they were able to formally identify this abductor as Schaefer. So at this point, Schaefer, he is still claiming that he was just really trying to teach these girls a lesson to make sure that they were safe in the future, and he had gone too far. He realises that now, but the police weren't falling for it, and he would be dismissed from the force. And not only that, but he would be arrested for false imprisonment and also aggravated assault. So just 2 weeks after his arrest, Schaefer posted his $15,000 bail, and he was free to walk without any restrictions. Now, his trial would be in November of 1972, but until then, he has free rein to do whatever he wants, which is ridiculous. Now, his wife and also his in-laws had stated that they hadn't noticed any change in his behaviour after this arrest, and they seemed to believe the story that he was just trying to teach these girls a lesson, but went too far. I wouldn't believe that, but then again, I'm not in their shoes. So on September the 27th of 1972, Susan Carol Place, who was just 17 years old, and Georgia Marie Jessup, who was just 16 years old, they would devastatingly be abducted and murdered by Gerard Schaefer. Now, the girls had met Ger at an adult education centre in Fort Lauderdale. So Schaefer, he had introduced himself to the girls as Jerry Shepherd, and he claimed that himself as Jerry Shepherd lived in Colorado, and he would be returning back to Colorado after his trip to Mexico. Now, Georgia, she was really interested in reincarnation and ESP, like sixth sense, which I totally get. I love that stuff so much. But Jerry Shepherd, why am I doing scissors? I meant Jerry Shepherd. He had claimed that he was really interested in all of that too. So he was acting like they had a lot in common. And then he was even saying to Susan Place that he was interested in the same music that she was. So he was forming this bond and connection with these girls and acting like, you know, these are long lost friends who have finally met and can really hit it off. And the girls are thinking like, oh my god, we've really made ourselves like a really good friend here, like he seems so much like us. And Georgia, Susan and Jerry, they all plan this trip to Fort Lauderdale where they're planning to go to the beach and play guitar and just hang out for a bit. So all three of them, they go back to Susan's house where they were met with Susan's mother, Lucille Place. Now, Lucille immediately is spotting this older guy in his 20s hanging out with a 16 and 17 year old, and she's thinking, that's weird, he gives me the creeps. Susan informs her mother of the plans and that they'll be gone for a while, and immediately Lucille is just filled with fear and dread. She was very suspicious of Jerry, but Jerry had spoken to her and sort of said, you know, I understand, like, these are your girls. Well, one's your girl, but obviously when you're best friends with someone, it's like their mum becomes your mum. I know you'll be very protective of them, but I assure you, like, I'm just wanting to go and spend some time with them. We've really got along. We're, like, good friends now. And I promise you, I will make sure these girls return home safely. And Lucille found comfort in this, and she started to think, you know, maybe I've just been a bit judgmental and judged them too fast. Maybe it will be fine. And then Susan and Georgia, they head off with Jerry Shepherd. And whilst Lucille is feeling a lot more assured by this Jerry Shepherd character, she's still thinking, you know, just as precaution, I'm going to note down his license plate number just so I've got it in case. So she notes down the license plate number of Jerry's 1969 Datsun, and then the girls head off with Jerry around 8:45 p.m. So it's now 4 days later, and Lucille has not heard from her daughter Susan Place. She starts to get worried at this point because Susan did say she would keep in contact. It would be a bit sporadic, but really, she should hear from her within a day or so. So she's not heard from her and she's getting a bit worried, so she wants to contact Georgia's mum Shirley just to see if the girls have been in contact with her. Now, when she gets in contact with Shirley, Shirley tells her that Georgia had ran away from home on September the 27th and she's not heard from her since. but she genuinely believed that her daughter had been a runaway. So at this point, Lucille says to Shirley, you know, I think we need to contact the police. I think something more sinister is going on here. So Shirley and Lucille, they head to the police station where they report both of the girls missing. Lucille then gives the number plate that she had took a note of from Jerry Shepherd's car. She gives this to the police, and when they trace it, it leads them to a different model of vehicle and to a resident in St. Petersburg who looks nothing like Jerry Shepherd. Now, police searches and inquiries, they literally lead nowhere, and disturbingly, by early 1973, the disappearance of both of these young girls became a cold case. So quickly. Now we're going back to October 26th of 1972. This is just less than 1 month since Georgia and Susan were last seen alive. So we have Mary Alice Briscolina, who was 14 years old, and then Elsie Lane Farmer, who was 13 years old. They would be abducted whilst they were hitchhiking. Now the girls, they were hitchhiking to a commercial boulevard restaurant, and they were hitchhiking from a Fort Lauderdale hotel by the sea. And devastatingly, the lifeless bodies of both of these young girls, 13 and 14 years old, would be found very early the following year close to Sunrise Boulevard, and they had been covered in undergrowth. Both of these young girls' legs had been spread wide open as far as they would go. Mary had been extensively beaten around her face and her head. Her skull had one massive blow to it, which had been proved to be the fatal wound. And several of Mary's fingernails had been torn from her hands, which indicated to the police that this young girl had fought for her life. Now, young Elsie, she had also been bludgeoned to death, and she had a lot of extensive wounds around her face and her skull. Many of Mary's friends had said that she had been very close with a man who they recall being named Gary Shepherd. Now, this Gary Shepherd had said that he was an ex-Wilton Manors police officer, and would you believe it, but later this would be formally identified as Gerard Schaefer. On January the 11th of 1973, Colette Marie Goodenough and Barbara Ann Wilcox, who were both 19 years old, they would be abducted whilst they were hitchhiking from, bear with me here, Sioux City, Iowa? That city in Iowa. They were hitchhiking from there to Florida. Now, what's really important to note here, just so we can follow the timeline, is these girls would be abducted in the time that Gerard Schaefer, Ger the Sicko, he was still on release before his formal sentencing, so before he would actually go to prison. At this point, he's still on release. And just to reconfirm, the sentencing that he is awaiting is to do with the trial that's coming up for Nancy and Paula, who escaped him. It was proven that that very day, Gerard Schaefer, he had made a long distance phone call from Cedar Rapids, Iowa to his home in Florida very shortly before Barbara and Colette had disappeared. It is said that he would have encountered these girls whilst driving back to Florida. And then in January of 1977, like how crazy is that? How many years can go by before these girls are found? But their skeletal remains would be found scattered around the woods near a big large tree and also an orange crate. Now, both of these girls, they had been bound with wire, hands behind their back, and forensics could tell that due to the deep marks in the tree, that these girls had been suspended from the tree. And there was also exposed root as well, which made them believe that this would be Gerard Schaefer, you know, once they figured out what Gerard Schaefer had done. But forensics could tell, because of the deep impressions on the tree, that these girls had been suspended in the same way that Nancy and Paula had. So we're now jumping back to December of 1972, and this is when Schaefer would appear in court for the abduction and assault of Nancy and Paula. Now, due to a plea bargain, Schaefer was able to plead guilty to 1 count of aggravated assault. What? The following had been said to Gerard in court. It is beyond the court's imagination to conceive how you were such a foolish and astronomical jackass as you were in this case. And like, low-key, I was like, yes, King, like, give it to him. Until I heard the rest. The judge had postponed formal sentencing until after the holidays. Like, oh yeah, that's great. Let him enjoy Santa Claus and presents and Christmas Day dinner and bringing in the new year whilst he's targeting these young girls who will never make it home to their families, who will never have another Christmas. But sure, let him go free. Like, let him do what he wants. Why not? If you ask me, they are as much of an astronomical jackass as Schaefer. Schaefer didn't start serving his sentence until January the 15th of 1973, which is why he had time to commit the murders we talked about earlier. So, in March of 1973, Lucille Place, she was the mother of Susan Place, she is in Susan's bedroom just having a look around to see if she can find anything. She finds a note written by Gerry Shepherd. Now, this note had a return address on it of 333 Martin Avenue in Stuart. And as soon as Lucille found this, she got her husband, got her car keys, hopped in the car and drove right over to that address. When Lucille arrives at this property, the building manager had said to her when she asked for Gerry Shepherd, the building manager had said, oh, Gerry Shepherd, that's not actually his real name. He rents a property here under his real name, Gerard Schaefer. So Gerry Shepherd, like, everybody knows that this guy uses that name, so much so that the building manager was able to say, oh, Gerry Shepherd's actually Gerard Schaefer. He just goes under this, like, alias. The building manager tells Lucille and her husband that Gerard Schaefer had actually been sent to prison for the abduction of 2 girls and also the attempted hanging of them. At this point, Lucille and her husband Ira are freaking out because this is who their daughter has went with, an abductor and a murderer. So at this point, Lucille and Ira, they are driving around the county, and this is when Lucille thinks to herself, oh my god, what if investigators have noted down the license plates incorrectly? So she's thinking that they've possibly noted down his license plate as a Pinellas County plate rather than a Martin County plate. Now, the reason that she thinks this is because Martin County plates that she was observing, they had 42 on the license plate, whereas the Pinellas County plates had a 4. And if they've done the 4, they would not have matched it to Gerry Schaefer. So Lucille and Ira, they tell the investigators and the police their discovery and what they think may have happened. So police, they run the plate again under the correct number of 42, and this is when it came up that that vehicle was a green-blue Datsun 1969, and it belonged to a man by the name of Gerard John Schaefer, who lived at 333 Martin Avenue in Stuart. Obviously, police, they go and they question Schaefer about this, and he denies any knowledge of this. He's like, I don't know who Susan Place is. I don't know who George is. I've not got an idea of who they are. They're lying. However, Lucille, she was able to formally identify Schaefer from a photograph that had been in the Wilton Manors Police Department, and she identified the person in the photograph as Gerry Shepherd. Gerard Schaefer. So on April the 21st of 1973, there was a father and a son who were going through the woods, and they found the decomposed, scattered remains of 2 individuals. They had been scattered in and around a hole that had been dug in the woods in Oak Hammock Park, which is in Port St. Lucie of Florida. This shallow grave / hole that they had, found the remains in was 212 feet from the nearest dirt road, so not even a main road. Quite incredible that these remains were actually found, to be honest. Now, there was really deep scratch marks found at the base of the tree where the torso had been bound to the bottom of the tree. One victim wore blue jeans, or at least the remnants of blue jeans, and these had like a little emblem of the Roadrunner on them. The other body that was found was completely nude, and the clothes that they had once wore was like sort of scattered around the bodies, and forensics had determined that both of the bodies of these young girls had been torn up and scattered by wild animals. Both of these young girls had been bound and murdered. Their spinal cords had been severed at the lumbar and cervical sections, and there were several bones that had been completely severed with either a huge knife or a machete. Both of these bodies had been decapitated after death, and both bodies had jaw fractures. One set of these remains were able to be identified as Susan Place, and it was evident that she had a gunshot wound to her jaw. Forensics had also confirmed that due to the markings and the impressions within the tree, that both of these young girls had been suspended and hung. And they also found like initials carved into a tree by a knife, and these initials were GJ. And I'm thinking like, who could this be? Like, is it Grace Jones? Gerald James? Or could it be Gerard John? Now, both of these bodies, they had been taken to Dade County Medical Examiner's office, and they were identified using dental records and also healed bone fractures. And ultimately, they were able to confirm that the bodies found was that of Susan Place and Georgia Jessup. So due to the location of the victims and also the similarities in the modus operandi of the abduction and murder of Susan and Georgia and the previous captivity of Nancy and Paula, police decided to obtain a search warrant so they can search Gerard Schaefer's home, his mother's home, and also his vehicle. I've got this lipstick to try. It's in the shade Stiletto Brown, but I'm like, is that too dark, or could we like make it work? I might try it, I don't know. Now, it would seem that Gerard Schaefer, like, I don't know if he was setting his mum up, right, or if he just thought that was a really good hiding spot for his stuff, but in his mother's home, they found 300 pages of really crude writing and drawings, which, by the way, I can confirm this guy cannot draw, like, for love nor money, cannot draw. But these writings and drawings, they were like stories and illustrations of these stories. So these stories, they stemmed across a period of years of kidnapping, like abductions, murder, rape, torture, humiliation, executing women by hanging. And each of the young women that he discussed in these pages, he was calling them whores and sluts, harlots, and he specifically named two of these victims, Belinda and Carmen. Now, he had claimed with Belinda and Carmen that he had hung them in a forest in the middle of nowhere near Pibberline Road. This sicko detailed how he would force his captors to drink either wine or beer because he wanted to watch them urinate or defecate whilst they were standing on these tiny makeshift plinths. Now, Gerard Schaefer, he would return to these bodies after weeks or after months, and he would have sex with the dismembered body parts. And he would also like extract teeth from their skull and just commit horrible acts of necrophilia even beyond sex. Now, he was also so obsessed with historical methods of torturing and execution. He loved to watch females in distress, and when these females were in so much distress, they weren't really in control of their bladder or their bowels from fear, and he would pleasure himself as he watched them urinate or defecate from sheer terror. Police had also found 11 guns, and they found bags of spent cartridges. There was 13 hunting knives, there was sections of rope, there was loads of pornographic magazines, and like, this creep, he had DIY'd these pornographic magazines to make it look as though these women were urinating or defecating, they were hung, they were restrained in weird ways. Like, he was doing his own wee makeshift drawings to make it into his fantasies, because the porn wasn't enough. And some of the women in his drawings, they would be like bearing bullet wounds or knife wounds or some kind of torturous wound that he had inflicted on them in his mind. There was also 37 black and white Polaroids of women being decapitated, being severed, being mutilated, being tortured. All the horrific things you can imagine were in these Polaroids. Now, there was also photos of Gerger the Sicko dressed up in women's underwear, and he had feces smeared over his bum, and I was like, Mark Redwine, is that you? Now, police, they had also found a letter from someone in Australia who Gerard Schaefer had come into contact with somehow, probably on the dark web because it's insane, but this person had sent Gerard Schaefer Polaroids of women being disemboweled. What? Now, police, they then located this gold jewellery box, and this had personal belongings and jewellery of of victims, like teenage girls. There was passports and clothing that belonged to all these teenage girls. They found a charm that had the initials MTN. It was engraved into the charm, but unfortunately the police weren't able to link these initials to a victim. Now, there was a gold locket found, and this gold locket had the name Lee engraved on it, and police were able to link this back to a victim. And this wound up being a missing girl by the name of Lee Hainlines Bonadies. Now, police found the driver's licence of Barbara Ann Wilcox. They also found the passport of Colette Marie Goodenough. Now, they also located like loads of bones and teeth, and when they had sort of pieced it all together, it worked out as around 8 separate victims that these bones and teeth belonged to. So police, they then searched Schaefer's own home on April the 6th, and they found 2 human teeth, several knives, several firearms. They had also found a blood-stained pillowcase, which evidently had been washed to try and get the stain out. Didn't work. And they also found Georgia Jessup's suede purse in the possession of Schaefer's wife. Now, Schaefer's wife had claimed that Gerard had given this purse to her the previous November. So by May the 12th, police have now gathered enough evidence and also circumstantial evidence that would link him to 9 murders and also several unsolved disappearances. They believe that this would have took place between 1969 and 1973. That very same month, he would be linked to a further 28 murders and unsolved disappearances. On May the 18th, Gerard Schaefer, he would be formally charged with first-degree murder of the murders of Georgia Jessup and Susan Place. Now, because a lot of the evidence that they had was deemed circumstantial, despite having items that belonged to many victims, he would ultimately only be charged with the murders of those 2 young girls. So he would be held without bond pending trial. He was then transferred to Florida State Hospital in Chattahoochee. Is that right? Chattahoochee? I don't know, it kind of sounds like alcoholic beverage, so I'm not sure. He would have to undergo 30 days of psychological examinations to see if he was sane at the time of the crimes, and also to see if he was competent enough to stand trial. So after he undergoes these psychiatric evaluations, he's then returned to St. Lucie County Jail on June the 20th. So the results from these psychiatric examinations would deem that Schaefer suffered from paranoia, psychosis, and severe sexual deviation. Now, Schaefer had claimed that he was an eliminator of women that he had deemed immoral. As if he's God. Like, get a grip, wee bro. Now, the DA, they had argued to the judge that at the time of the murders, Schaefer was completely sane and that he was competent enough to stand trial. And ultimately, the judge upheld that and said, yeah, Schaefer's ass can go right to trial. Now, like many serial killers, Schaefer decided that he was going to talk to the press. And when he spoke to the press, he claimed that he was completely innocent and he was very confident that he was going to be exonerated. The guy lives in a fantasy land. Oh, that is really dark. Can I make this work? I cannot decide if I love or hate this, because part of me is like, wow, Autumn Queen, and then another part of me is like, do I look like Mark Redwine with like the feces smeared around my mouth? Oh, I think I like it, I don't know. So Schaefer would be brought to trial on September the 17th of 1973. Now, prosecution, they sought life imprisonment for Schaefer for the murder of Georgia Jessup and Susan Place. Due to the time, the Supreme Court of Florida had deemed the death penalty unconstitutional, so he couldn't get the death penalty, which is really annoying. However, I will say that Susan Place's mother had spoke out about this, and she was quite relieved at him not getting the death penalty. She said at first that she had wanted the death penalty because obviously he had murdered her daughter, but she had decided that life in prison is actually more of a punishment because he'll have to suffer more, and he will. But we'll get there. During trial, Schaefer was like coldly staring at anyone who was testifying against him in support of the girls. And then when someone was being a witness for him and, you know, kind of defending him as much as they could, he would smile, he'd turn to the press and smile at them, giving them a wee, like as if he's going to get off. You're not going to get off, why are you so stupid? Susan Place's parents, they had also testified at the trial to confirm that Schaefer was the man that claimed to be Jerry Shepherd, who was with the girls on the day of their disappearance. Then Georgia's parents and also her younger sister, they had testified to confirm that the suede purse found in Jerry's home belonged to Georgia. Now, Nancy Trotter and Paula Wells, they also testified against Gerard Schaefer during the trial. They told the court about the horrific ordeal that they went through with him, and also presented into evidence was like the tree limbs that Nancy and Paula had been suspended from, to show that the girls had been there for a very long time due to the deep markings that were in the tree, and these markings also correlated with the markings on other branches where other girls had been suspended. Now, Schaefer's little storybook, that was also entered into evidence. They went through his grotesque writings and drawings in, quite descriptive detail. And then on September the 26th of 1973, the jury would deliberate for 5 hours and 10 minutes before returning 2 guilty verdicts of first-degree murder. And then on October the 3rd, closing arguments to determine the sentencing would commence. And the following day, Schaefer would be sentenced to 2 concurrent life sentences for first-degree murder of Susan Place and Georgia Jessup. Now, a high school girlfriend of Schaefer's by the name of Sondra London, she contacted Schaefer whilst he was in prison to ask if he would want to co-write a book with her. He agreed, and this book would depict the horrific mutilations, abuse, torture and execution of young women. With this book, Schaefer was the one who was given most of the input for the murders and the tortures and abuse, etc. of these young ladies, because of his conviction and his experience as a sadistic, evil murderer. But of course, he claimed that all of this was just fiction. He just thought it up. He's just very creative. And then once Gerard Schaefer had died, Sondra London, she had published this book which contained letters from Schaefer that had actually confirmed that he had murdered all these young girls. And he also tried to claim that Ted Bundy admired him and was jealous of him because his victim count was higher. Apparently, Ted Bundy looked at Gerard Schaefer as God. Don't know if I believe that, to be honest, but what do I know? And he also stated that Ted Bundy was a copycat. Ted Bundy's murders were a copycat of Gerard Schaefer's murders, apparently, according to Schaefer. In one of these letters, he claimed that he had started to kill in 1965 when he was just 19 years old, which doesn't really line up with what the police said because they thought it was 1969, but he might be admitting to more murders prior to this time. And now we get to the best part of the story, the day that Gerard Schaefer met his fateful end. So on December the 3rd of 1995, Gerard Schaefer was found dead on his cell floor. Now, a fellow inmate had informed the staff of the prison that they had walked into Gerard Schaefer's cell and found him lying there dead. And not only was he dead, he had been murdered. Brutally murdered. We love to hear it. So Schaefer had been stabbed to death by being stabbed over 40 times. All of these wounds were to his face, his neck, his head, his body. His throat had been slashed as well. And his right eye was completely destroyed and he had several rib fractures. Don't know who done it. Apparently he was a prison informant. He was ratting out other people and they caught wind of this and decided to murder him. And although these people in prison, I'm assuming, are probably bad people because they murdered this guy as well, give them a medal. Give them a medal for killing Gerard Schaefer. As always, I'm just going to do a complete 360 and bring this right back to the people who are important in this case, and that's the victims. Now, although it is unknown just how many victims Gerard Schaefer had, or how many suspected victims, I would like to go through the names of the confirmed victims but also the suspected victims as well, just so we have all their names here, and I will try and find as many photos as I can. I'm also going to give the dates that these victims had disappeared as well, just so we have more of a clearer idea, and then if somehow there's anyone with information out there around those dates, then they can maybe help. So on October the 2nd, 1966, Nancy Elaine Leichner, who was 21, and Pamela Ann Natter, who was 20, they disappeared whilst hiking through Ocala National Forest. On September the 8th of 1969, Lee Farrell Hainline Bonadies, who was 24, disappeared on her way to Miami. Her body would then be found in April of 1978 and her skull had 3 bullet holes. On December the 18th of 1969, Carmen Marie Hallock, aged 22, disappeared after going to meet with a male teacher regarding a government job. 2 of her teeth and a gold shamrock pin belonging to her would be found in Schaefer's home. On December the 29th, 1969, Peggy Rann, who was 9 years old, and Wendy Stevenson, who was just 8 years old, disappeared whilst going to get ice cream. Schaefer had told his girlfriend that he had murdered both of them. On January the 18th, 1970, Murad Ellen Malaric, who was 19, and Karen Lynn Farrell, who was 18, would be found decapitated on April the 16th. These crimes were both linked to Schaefer. On January the 4th, 1972, Belinda Hutchins, 22, was last seen entering a blue Datsun. Police found her address book at Schaefer's home. On February 29th, 1972, Deborah Sue Lowe, 13, was last seen walking to school before disappearing. Schaefer had previously worked with her father and had visited the household plenty of times before, and her family believe that Schaefer is responsible. On March 19, 1972, Bonnie Taylor, who was 20 years old, was stopped for a speeding violation by a male police officer before completely disappearing. On August 11th of 1972, Leonard Joseph Massar, who was 46, was last seen alive at Riviera Beach. His handless body was found where Nancy and Paula had previously been hung. On August the 31st of 1972, Elizabeth Renee Wilt, who was 22 years old, was last heard from by her stepmother on August the 30th before disappearing. Her body has never been found. On October the 26th of 1972, Mary Alice Briscalina, 14, and Elsie Lena Farmer disappeared on their way to a restaurant. Their decapitated bodies were found on January the 17th and February the 15th of 1973. A gold chain belonging to Mary was found in Schaefer's home. On December the 23rd of 1972, Suzanne Gail Poole, who was 15 years old, was reported missing by her family just before Christmas. Her skeletal remains were found on June the 16th, 1974, and were just identified in 2022 through genetic genealogy. And then on January the 1st of 1973, Colette Marie Goodenough, who was 19 years old, and Barbara Ann Wilcox, who was also 19 years old, disappeared whilst hitchhiking just days before Schaefer's jail sentence was to start. Personal property of both these women would be found in Schaefer's apartment. This has honestly just been such a horrific case, and Gerard Schaefer is one of the worst monsters ever. Like, God knows how many victims this man really has. These are the list of suspected victims and confirmed victims, but as we know, he's been linked to so many that we don't even really know his real victim count. And I just want to state once more how important it is to remember the victims of this case, not for how they were killed, but for who they were as people. Each and every single one of them have family that love and adore them, who miss them every single day. They had their whole lives ahead of them before it was completely stolen by this penguin-looking freak. And I honestly just send so much love to the families of these victims and the victims herself, because the hell that they've went through, we cannot even imagine. But that is it for another true crime and makeup episode. I really hope you found this one interesting, and I hope for some of you it was one that you've maybe not heard of before. I think we can all agree that this man is absolute scum of the earth, and I hope he is burning in hell every single day. If you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to subscribe, put the notification bell on, because I post twice a week, every single week, with a new interesting true crime case. Any details of products used on my face today will be found in description below with direct links in case there's anything you would like to purchase. You'll also find my TikTok and Instagram handles if you want to give me a follow over there. I am planning content to post more on there, so if you'd like to keep up with me, then head on over and give me a follow. Any case suggestions can be left in the comments below or sent to my email, which you will also find down in the description. I know I said it at the start, but I'm going to say it again because I'm an absolute beggar. Please, please, please make sure you leave a comment on this video as well as a like. The comments really help with engagement, help push my videos out to YouTube because it can see that people are engaging and enjoying the content. But that is it for today's case. I really hope you enjoyed. Be a good person, don't be a bad person, stay safe, look after each other, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!